Hi, everyone. Welcome. It's so good to have all of you here. My name is Robin. I am the front of house representative for today. I use she and they pronouns. I am a white person with long, dark, curly hair. I have gold wire rim glasses, and I'm sitting in my very tiny living room, and there's a blue wall behind me with some spider plants and a bouquet of very beautiful, bright, sunshiny sunflowers next to me. If you'd like captions or the transcript for tonight's panel, at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you can find two letters saying CC. If you click that and hit either View Full Transcript, the transcript will appear along the side of your screen, or if you select Show Subtitle, the captions will appear running along the bottom of your screen. I will share instructions for that process in the chat. I will share instructions for that in the chat shortly, in a PDF as well as a Word document. So if you're feeling confused, no worries. I will do that shortly. I would ask everyone, please, to mute your microphone. If you don't need to interact with the if you don't need to interact with anyone in the call, please turn off your video if that's all right. If you have any questions, you can message in the chat to me privately or publicly, and I will respond. I just want to remind everyone also, if anyone missed it while they were away from their computer, that this call is being recorded and it will be shared afterwards. If you have not yet renamed yourself to Anon and would prefer to remain anonymous, please do so now. Since I'm your front of house manager, I'm here for anything that you need tech-wise for tech support. I'll be keeping my eyes on the chat, like I mentioned, and again, there's if you're having any trouble finding the chat, all of those sorts of tools like captions and chat are at the bottom of your Zoom screen. The fastest way to ask a question would be to type it into the chat, but if you're having any technical difficulties, you can email me at info@passmarai.on.ca, or you can call, I'll put this in the chat afterwards, by the way, you can call 416-504-7529. I'm going to hand it over shortly to Rinchin, and I'll be turning off my camera, but I'll still be present, just so everyone knows. If you get removed from the Zoom call for any reason whatsoever, then just try clicking the link again, and I'll let you back into the call. Again, if there's any technical difficulties communicating through Zoom, just email me or call me, and I will get to you as soon as possible. I hope that you all enjoy our time together. I'm very much looking forward to it myself. I'm going to pass it off to Rinchin. Thank you so much, everybody.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Robin, for getting us started. Like Robin had mentioned, my name is Rinchin Doma, and I'd like to welcome you all to our Digital Creators Lab workshop series. We're going to have 3 workshops throughout the month of October, and we have Sharon Clark today who will be kicking us off. And this is a part of our larger digital transformation project that I'll have Marjorie speak on a bit later. But I am the Digital Creators Lab producer. I am a Himalayan woman with long black hair. I'm wearing a dark forest green crew neck. I have hoop silver earrings. I have a white background with a closet, that is my visual description. I just wanted to explain that that's something that we're trying to put into practice as we do our Zoom sessions. But yeah, like I had mentioned, I'm going to pass it on to Marjorie Chan, who is our artistic director, who will, and also to Indrid Kasapi, who is our associate artistic director, to just expand a bit more about this project and this workshop that we're going to be in today.
Hi, everyone. I'm Marjorie Chan. I'm the artistic director. My hair is about shoulder length, It's an indescribable dyed color that I'm calling mauve or rose gold. It's down today. I'm wearing a black sweater and a gray dress. And Indrit?
Hello, everyone. My name is Indrit Kasapi. I'm the Associate Artistic Director, and I'm wearing a black t-shirt. I have a buzzed head. I'm a white man with a black beard as well, and there's a beige curtain behind me and some black and white photos on the other side, just hanging on the wall. Welcome to all of you. This is a very exciting time for us. Before we begin, I wanted to take a moment together to try and feel a bit more connected, I think. So if you want to find a spot wherever you are right now, that you can be close to the floor, or if you can just somehow sit in a way where your feet are touching the ground. And I want us to close your eyes and take a big breath and imagine all the breaths that are happening with all the participants that are here together. And imagine that we're all in our respective places, homes, offices, wherever we are, and that we are all connected by what's underneath us, which is this ground and this earth and the waterways that keep us and bind us together. And that we are always united in so many ways. And we are connected right now through the technology of Zoom. There's internet, there's Wi-Fi, there's signals that's going up into the sky and back down, and wires that are connecting us, and that there is so much energy that is being used for us to be here together, even though we're not in person physically, we are connected via this technology. And so we acknowledge that technology and that energy that's being used for us to come together, and what effects that energy might have on certain communities and certain areas for the convenience and the privilege that we have to be here together. So you can open your eyes now. And I wanted to take a moment to acknowledge the original caretakers of the land that I'm at right now, which is Takaranto, otherwise also known as Toronto. The original caretakers, the Anishinaabeg, the Wendat, the Haudenosaunee, and the Mississaugas of the Credit, as well as all of other nations that are recorded and unrecorded, names that we might have lost due to colonial history. I also want to remind us that we live in Toronto. If you're in Takaranto, you live in the dish with one spoon treaty territory. And it's a reminder, it's a beautiful reminder that we have agreed that we will take care of this land and share it peacefully together. And so it's in that spirit that we also offer a lot of the work that we do at Theatre Passe Muraille as well, sharing that together as a community. Thank you. I think I'm going to pass it on to Marjorie now.
Hi, my friends. I'm a little bit verklempt with that, with being here today. Just to say that I won't say too much. We really want to get on to Sharon, who's our honored guest today. I won't say too much, only that to say that as Rinchin mentioned, this is part of a larger project, and partly why I'm moved is this is the first workshop we're offering, but because this was dreamt of in midst of the height of the pandemic and the height of really kind of stressful time of the pandemic, which unfortunately we still haven't come out through on the other side, and in that way. So that, you know, we were inspired by digital approaches and inspired by the work that we were doing. We were inspired, but we also saw that there was capacity lacking both in our venue as well as in our artists, that there was lack of access and knowledge and access to skills. And so that was something that we identified during the pandemic. And so, as Rinchin mentioned, as part of the larger project, as you may or may not know, the backspace at Theatre Passe Muraille is undergoing a renovation and will be better equipped. It will be informed by these workshops and by surveys that we'll send out and by our lab participants on the other side, the programming side, and that's the Digital Creators Lab. It encompasses these workshops. It encompasses I'm calling kind of experiments, or actually I call them guinea pigs, and some of them are here today, and I know that they know I call them guinea pigs, of our lab participants, who are Luke Reese, Katie Reddy Walters, Nantanka Bazar, which is Humanshi Sitlani and Neha Podeville, as well as Theta Dupalais, which is Carmen Lee and Roland Au. And if any of you are here and want to come on camera and give a wave, please give a wave. They'll be going through the guinea pigs. We'll be going through some experiments and gaining more knowledge from our digital advisors, including Sharon Clark, as well as Sammy Chen at Chimeric from Vancouver. And as well, we'll be supported by Indrit and myself as lab dramaturges, as well as Jess Watkins, who will also be joining us as a dramaturge. And we'll go through a whole process of learning that will inform partly how we equip our backspace. And at that point in time, the backspace, we will also have workshops on our new equipment and how to use them. And we hope to be in person at that time. I do want to introduce, and as well as you've met Rinchen, who will be producing and coordinating this entire massive project. I'm cognizant of time, so I do want to introduce our honored guest. Our honored guest is Sharon Clark, who is a creator, a writer, a playwright, and the creative director of Raucous in the UK. I met Sharon in Banff, and I always feel like every time I talk to Sharon, I'm a little bit smarter. And so she just, the fact that she comes from a practice of playwriting, but then now she's also involved in what Raucous' specialty that you're going to learn about is really kind of immersive work that takes the audience more into that conversation and into an urgent conversation of what in a theatrical way. It's extraordinary. It's just going to blow your mind. And so I'd love to hand it off to Sharon.
Hi, good evening, and it's a real pleasure to be here. I just wish I was with you in person, obviously. That would be amazing. Just to say, I am a middle-aged white woman. I've got on quite dark lipstick today because I'm feeling a bit gloomy for some reason. I don't know why. So I've cheered my lips up. I've got dyed blonde hair because why not? And I've got tortoise rim glasses. I've got a stripy top on and I've got dungarees on today. I thought I'd grace you with my dungarees. And I'm actually in a studio, and behind me is multicolored tiles and a brick wall. Also, just in case, as we started this call, I'm in the city centre of Bristol in the UK, where I'm based, is a huge drumming band has just started to play rather rambunctiously outside the window. So I hope you can't hear them, but they are pretty amazing. So without further ado, I'd like to share my screen with you because as I talk through practice and process, I want to share with you the things we might have got slightly right, the things we definitely didn't get right, how we think about making this kind of work and how we started, and the milestones across the way. So I'm afraid it sounds like a huge me brag, and I do apologize for that. It really isn't meant to be that. I'm just hopefully can share some of the learning we've painfully made as we've crawled along tech and theatre. Brilliant. Okay, let's hope this doesn't let me down. Bear with me, it doesn't let me down. Hopefully you can all see that, and that is okay. Can I get a thumbs up from Marjorie? You can see that, Rinchen, as well. Thank you so much. That's just amazing. Okay, so today I'm going to be talking to you about a company I started 10 years ago, which is called Raucous. And we talk about ourselves as a company that fuses theatre, technology and immersion. I'm going to talk in depth about who we are and where we came to be. But primarily and first of all, my name is Sharon Clark, and primarily I am a playwright. That's my job. That's what I do. I've worked in theatre for 36 years and they still haven't kicked me out, which is amazing. And I've been a playwright for about 17 of those. And Primarily, my plays were performed in theatres where an audience sat, they observed, they left, they were silent, and the action took place on a stage in a square proscenium arch. What we call in my company now my straight plays, i.e. they are served up in quite a straight way. I don't know if any of you have heard of Punch Drunk, which is a company from the UK that is internationally renowned for their immersion work of taking over huge, massive buildings and allowing you to wander around in an immersed state. And it was Felix Barrett, who runs Punch Drunk, who sort of came up with this quote, which I think really was what sparked me off in thinking about making work in a new way. And he said, the idea is to avoid stagnation. If audiences get used to the rules, change them. And with the advent of technology and a more connected world, I began to think about those rules of my audience coming in to an auditorium where they've bought a ticket and they sit silently and they're too frightened to leave the auditorium to use the toilet, for instance. And they are there as mere observers. They are there to observe and then to leave. And I began to think about this quite a lot. I was very lucky when I started that I wanted to write a piece of immersion, and I began to look at the work of Angela Carter, who is a very famous British novelist who works in feminist fairy tales. She's rewritten all the fairy tales from a feminist point of view. I admire her very much, and I thought about writing a play that kind of channels her worlds and her thinking. And I began to realize also that I probably need to I needed something extra. I needed the audience to be more involved, and I needed something to happen that would instill awe and wonder in my audience. It had to be magical. So I used to smoke quite heavily. I miss it very much. I know we shouldn't, but I love it very much. And I was outside a theatre and talking to a friend of mine called Claire Reddington, and she said, what are you doing? What are you up to next? What's going on? And I said, I've got an idea for a play. It's a bit mad. I think I might need a bit of technology, but I don't know how to do it because I'm a playwright. And she brilliantly is head of an amazing organization in Bristol called the Pervasive Media Studio, which looks at very much what Theatre Pasmarai are looking at themselves, is looking at creativity and how artists can come together and use technology and immersion in their work, pushing the boundary of what is possible when telling stories to an audience. She said to me, why don't you come and play? Why don't you take a risk with us? Come to us. I'll give you a little bit of startup money. I'll introduce you to a digital technologist. See what happens. It's a risk, but let's see what happens. That was 10 years ago. I'm still at the studio, as you can see behind me. I'm here. And I formed a company called Raucous. And this is how we talk about ourselves, that we are a collective of all sorts of disciplines, all sorts of people. And we want to look at how theatre stories can be made more immediate and emotive for our audience through the use of immersion and layered realities. That's quite a mouthful, I know, but I'm going to take you through it. I'm going to show you examples of the kind of way that we've been thinking. But for funding purposes, this is how we talk about ourselves. But we are, and I really cannot stipulate to all of you watching, I am a playwright. I cannot code. I'm not a programmer. I don't know how the internet works. I don't know how virtual reality works. I don't know. But I know amazing people who do. And so gathering them into Raucous has been 10 years of my life, into a team who have a shared vision. But we aren't anything without story. Story is where we start. This is where I start from. This is the point that Raucous takes off, is story is everything to us, not digital tech, not immersion, story. And that's the first thing we start with in the company, is what stories do I want to tell as the writer of this work? but I don't write anything for a very, very long time. We sit in a room together and we try and work out where the audience are in that story. Why are we telling this story now? Why is it important? And I like to think that with my collaborators in the company, they have also begun to understand the structure of storytelling. I had a digital technologist, a young man, come join the company, and he didn't know anything about theatre at all, nothing. So we kind of did a skills swap of him teaching me a little bit about tech and me teaching him about theatre. And one day he was at a read through that actors were doing of our new show. And he looked at me and he went, "Oh my God, it all comes alive when the actors speak the lines." And I was like, yeah, it does. So this is where we start. Story is the most important thing for us. We're also very, very interested in immersion. This is still from our show, Ice Road, which I'll talk to you about in a moment. The drums are really now starting in the background, and my seats just moved, they're so loud. And immersion for me was important about breaking that kind of moat between the action, the actors and the audience, so that the audience can move around a space. And here we have the actor actually in the room with the audience, so that they can move around and be part of the action. They can feel it. It's tangible. They are part of it. We always give our audience a role. I'll talk about that in a little bit, mainly as a group of people, but immersion is what we do. And then of course there is the technology. I am not a technologist, and something I do need to say about tech is we don't always reach for the newest thing. I'm not interested in gizmos and gadgets. I'm not always looking at the next generation of virtual reality. I am looking at the right technology that does the right job for the right story. So it could be that I use a technology that is 5 years old and is kind of gone out of fashion a bit. It could be I use old technology like an umbrella. It could be that we use something that really never took off, but actually is right for us. Using the right technology for the story is absolutely a key driver in how we think about making work. This is Helen Sciera, actually, who's our binaural sound designer, and we'll talk about that in a bit. And one of the things that we've become known for and that I'm really excited by is something called the familiars. Familiars in, I don't know, I think you may have it in Canadian culture too, but in British culture, which is always had a familiar, which was meant to be the devil in the shape of a pet animal that always sort of followed them around. And it just felt right for me that this is a thing that follows me around all the time, these familiars. What I wanted was that each audience member who may be very new to technology and really scared of it or nervous of it or anxious about it, is that they are given during the show an object that looks domestic and inanimate. And then during the show, at a particular moment of heightened tension, that object will start to do something. They haven't had to trigger it, they haven't had to interact with it, but it will start to move in some way or interact with them or interact with the story. I will be telling you more about these in a moment and giving you some examples. And we now call them object-based technology. That's what we started to call it, or OBT. We're not the only people doing this work, but I think at the moment we're the ones who are the most interested in it and are using it in its storytelling, pure storytelling way. But these are, by the way, are an experiment that went horribly wrong. We're going to be talking about horribly going wrong soon. But this is technology that cost me a lot of money and it didn't work. So, you know, there's an example for us all. So these, the familiars, they provide each audience member with a personalized object that feels specially designed for them. So each familiar, and I'll talk to you about what they are in a minute, they're sort of objects that we specially designed, is they're all different. So each person takes their familiar, holds it in their hands or wears it, and it's a totally unique design for them. We're not reinventing technology, as I've just said, but we're repurposing it. And we're there to surprise, not to intimidate. I don't know if any of you have been to Immersion and been a little bit nervous about going through the front door and what to expect on the other side. It is very key to the work we do, for me, that we do not alienate our audience. We do not make them feel they're stupid. We do not make them feel that they're going to be made a fool of, or that they're going to break something. This is really key to what we do, and I'm going to be talking about that more in a minute. We animate the inanimate. That is what we want to do, whether that is the room we are in, the walls and the ceiling and the floor, or whether they're the familiars. The idea is that we take a space that is flat and we animate it in unusual and surprising ways. The familiars also underscore the emotional moment of the script. So the object you're holding will animate at a time of heightened emotion. And it allows the audience to be tangible with it. They can feel the scenography. It's in their hand. It's what's called haptics. Haptics is about feeling stuff. So that it's in their hand or around their neck, and it sort of reverberates through their body as well, so that the scenography is part of them. They also build what we call the congregation. We don't call them an audience because our audience don't just sit and watch, they are part of the show. We call it a congregation. And we start to build them using these objects, because when the objects start to move, everybody starts to look at each other. All the audience start to interact with each other, going, is yours moving this way? Is yours moving that way? What's yours doing? Let me see. They start to really break down the barriers of what is very Britishness as well, around being really in the moment on their own. And it also helps us to cast the audience as a character within the role of the narrative. So for instance, we don't give them individual characters, but they are as a congregation, they are the thing that one of the characters has been talking about all the way through. There's a moment of recognition with our audience as such, like, oh, that's us. They've been talking about that thing, and I've just realized it's actually us. And it's really important, I think, that congregation is built together, so you feel safe and secure in immersion, and you feel part of a bigger whole. And we always talk about this at Raucous. We talk about instilling a sense of awe and wonder. This is what we want to build. This is where we work in immersion, is I want that little breath. Do you know what audiences do when they're a bit like overwhelmed by something, or something's happened they didn't expect, where they kind of give a little intake of breath? And that intake of breath for us is a measure that we've done a good job. And all of that needs, of course, a transdisciplinary collaboration. I'm going to reflect on that a little bit later. It's not easy. We are scientists, set designers, sound designers, playwrights, actors, filmmakers, composers, and we all have to find a common language. We've had to taken 10 years for us to find a common language by which we can speak to each other, refer to each other, and respect each other. I know sometimes when it's quite fraught and stressful when we're about to go into production, is sometimes you can forget the worth of another collaborator. And it's really important to take yourself outside the room and remember why they're there. Transdisciplinary collaboration takes a long time to build, because it takes a long time for people to trust each other when you are quite fearful when something might go wrong. So I want to just show you then, after talking about the kind of who we are, is what we do. So our first show was called The Stick House. And we make our work in found spaces, what we call found spaces or unloved spaces, which are spaces that have basically been falling down over time. And we go in and we put an infrastructure in, and we invite an audience into those spaces, and we make them, we build the scenography in the space so that it becomes immersive. As I said earlier, the Stick House was actually my first ever show and my first foray into this work. And it was based on the work of Angela Carter and the Bloody Chamber. It's not an adaptation of it, it's just based in that world. But we always have an artist that we are really interested in as well, and that speaks to us about that play. And for us, the artist was Otto Dix. So the set designer and myself, Hannah Wolf, we sat down and we looked at Otto Dix's work, and built a palette for us about how our work might look in this kind of magical realism feminist fairy tale. And this is how we talked about the world. We wanted to build something very atmospheric, very magical, very mysterious. We wanted to build tension. We wanted to look at the tropes of young women and much older controlling men. It was part of what I was doing. But also, although you thought you were in a magical world and a fairy tale, actually what you began to realize as you were going through it is that we weren't in a magical world. We were actually in Bavaria in 1938 at the outbreak of the Second World War. And Marietta wasn't our protagonist, a magical creature. She was a young Jewish woman who was about to enter a maelstrom she didn't see coming due to her own naivety. So this is some of the marketing copy we did for that show. And this is part of the space. The space we used were 7 tunnels under Bristol Temple Mead Station. It's our big rail terminus here in Bristol, and it was built in 1823 or 24 by Isambard Kingdom Brunel. And underneath is the ash pits, where the steam engines would drop hot ash, and they have been left dormant for 85 years, never opened. And we were lucky enough to get the keys to them, and this is one of the spaces as we started to kit it out. There were rats, there was no running water, no electricity, no floor, no toilets, no fresh air, been no air in there for 85 years. So we had to work incredibly hard to get it ready and fit for purpose. But the atmosphere in there, you could not buy it. It was incredible, dark, gloomy, smelly, love a bit of smell in our work, but it had these 7 tunnels we could move our audience around. So this is Marietta, our protagonist. She's in the 3rd tunnel. We built the stick house. We built the stick house out of chairs and pallets, and we could get 80 people in there. And the whole story was around her and this mask that had been magically put on her head. Here we are with some of the immersion. There's Marietta and Chris, the actor, played the hobbledehoy. I'm also really interested in language. So the hobbledehoy on the left there spoke in a mixture of Yiddish and English. I love language. I love playing with language. And in this kind of world that you are building, literally and metaphorically building, you can start to really mess language up, and your audience will trust you and go with it. This is another still from it. And then we used projection mapping, which is we use projection mapping architecturally. So you can see the tunnel walls going down. We projection mapped all the bricks as you can see them starting to build. And then what happened is we exploded it. So it looked like the walls were falling down. So the projection itself then crumbled and it blew up. And it looked like everything behind her had been destroyed. And it's amazing that you can build that kind of set just with film. You don't have to actually do the thing that you think you're going to do. This is Chris. Once again, we use projection mapping at the back. There's a hole at the back of the wall, and we got bugs and creatures coming out of that with projection mapping. But one of the things that's really, really important to me is authenticity. So actually in this space, he's sat on a hill and it's made of real grass, and the audience are sat on real grass, and we grew real grass underground hydroponically, and we kept it alive for 7 weeks as the show ran for 7 weeks. Chris, the hobbledehoy, the actor here, is holding a familiar for this show, which is it was a doll. And he's holding it, and he's holding it, and he's using it, and he's showing the audience how to hold it and what the importance is to the story through the narrative. So for the stick house, the familiars were dolls. They were corn dolls. They were all individually designed. And this is the moment our congregation come together to find the dolls. The dolls, at the top there, you can see the lights. They came down in a massive bathtub, and they had the label on that had a label on that was the name of each audience member. So you found your name, you found your doll, you held it tight. You don't know why, you just thought it was something sweet. Well, they were quite horrible looking actually, but this is the moment, and this moment is the moment where the audience finally start to work together as they start to pull out the dolls and call the names out to each other. So the narrative drivers, that's what we call them, is what we're going to use in our show to tell the story. In this, we used obviously live performance, we used film, we used character projection mapping. A little girl ran along walls and you had to follow her. We used architectural projection mapping where the space disintegrated. We used robotic bugs. They were so beautiful. They walked along the wall and along the floor, and you were meant to follow them. What we didn't expect is in the dark, people stood on them and squished them, and they lasted 3 days, and they cost me $5,000. And that's the thing. Don't put anything nice on the floor when it's dark. We used a ghost in the mirror. So there's a big mirror, and suddenly there was a 3D animation in it. We used the dolls. We always use original composition. Our plays always have a soundtrack, and we use a directional and binaural sound. Smell is a massive part of what we do. We use a lot of scent. Obviously, straight stagecraft, a set, and everything else. And also, we used what we call onboarding, which is you bought your ticket, and as you bought your ticket, your phone rang. And you picked your phone up and you would hear the roar of a beast, the roar of the wild would come through. It was simple because we were starting out. This is a picture of one of the dolls. As you can see, they're not very beautiful. They weren't meant to be. They were meant to be quite ugly. And what happened was you would hold them. As Marietta went into the wood with the woodcutter, which she shouldn't do because the woodcutter turns out is a real baddie, is the doll started to get a heartbeat. So they started to just start da-dum, really soft, da-dum, really slow, da-dum. And then a little light heart started to beat in the chest. And then the heart started to get faster and faster and faster. And everybody's was at a different rate. And it went da-dum, 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 da-dum. And then as Marietta was attacked in the woods, the arms spasmed out in a kind of stop motion. Once again, you know, it's an idea. People threw them at the wall because the shock of having these inanimate objects animated made them throw them away. So once again, you know, think about that, everybody. How shocking is it going to be, and how is your audience going to physically react when an inanimate object animates itself? They throw them on the floor, basically. Our second show is Ice Road, and Ice Road took place in an old swimming pool in the centre of town, which has its ceiling had fallen in, and it was in a parlous state. And this show, I was interested in the Siege of Leningrad, so a much more realistic, less magical realism, more realism. So we used the swimming pool and we turned it into a street in Leningrad, and we bombed it out and we covered it with snow. And also I became obsessed with Gulag tattoos, Russian tattoos in the Gulag. I am now an expert on the stories they can tell because I really wanted to use them in the show. The show was about a young woman in an orchestra. I had found out that during the Second World War, during the Siege of Leningrad, where 1.4 million people starved to death, the theatres and the orchestras remained open. The actors and the musicians died on stage, but they stayed open every night. They were bombed. Audience members didn't get up from their chairs. It was free. But culture was so important to the Russians then to keep them alive that they had to come together every night and watch the Cherry Orchard or listen to Shostakovich. And so in our play, our lead protagonist was an orchestra member who had saved 3 feral children from the bombing and their relationship with each other. In our stories, all of our protagonists are female unspoken heroines for me who've never really had their stories told. And actually it's about the myth making of women, of how we can start to make our own myths about us rather than being apologized for or forgotten. This is our lead actress. She actually was a flautist. and she is here playing an imaginary flute because her own one has been stolen. This is the audience coming into the space. As you can see, we have structures up there that are dressed eventually. The floor is covered in snow. And here she is at a moment where she's just been part of an aerial bombing. We use things like real fire, so stagecraft, and that's really important to us about keeping it as real as possible. And here you can see the audience are really close to her. And this is, you can see the lady behind our actor there who's wearing a kind of speaker. And that's the familiar for this show. This is a moment where the young actor here, we had Messerschmitt projection mapped on the ceiling that came over in an aerial bombardment. And because we were on top of a swimming pool, we boarded over the swimming pool. We put woofers underneath that made a bass sound that made the floor shake. So as the airplanes came over really low in this very big projection mapping, the floor moved and you could hear aerial bombing through binaural sound. And he was like kind of conducting this aerial bombing. We also used animation for the first time, and the Bristol-based internationally acclaimed company, Aardman, were amazing in working with this, my small little company, in doing an original pen and ink drawing animating for us that was projected across all of the walls. So for Ice Road, we used live performance and film again. We used animation, but we used projection mapping this time on bodies. So the lead actress, when she took all her clothes off, had gulag tattoos on her body. And as she began to tell her story, they began to move. So they began to move, her tattoos began to move across her body and they began to bleed out into the snow. Or she put an arm out and suddenly 3 daggers appeared on her arm as if she was being tattooed in front of us. There was architectural projection mapping again of an aerial bombardment. The ground shook. The familiars, I'm going to show you them in a minute. Once again, composition and smell. And these were our familiars this time. They were Soviet radios you put around your neck. During the show, they would just suddenly spark up and interrupt the action of the voices of the dead. And on the back of each radio was a little biog of the last person who had owned that particular radio. I wrote 67 biogs for this. Yeah, they interrupted the sound. So, you know, a live performer would be speaking and suddenly somebody's would spark up and you'd hear a couple rowing in a flat above us, but actually they died in a bombardment. And that's fine. But what they then also did is at the end of the show, when our protagonist is dying, because I obviously write overt comedies, you start to realize that your speaker is tuning up and that you are the violinist, you are the second oboe, your timpani, your drum. And that if you stand in the formation of a Russian orchestra, you play Shostakovich's Leningrad, which is the symphony he played for Leningrad's fall. So, and if you stepped out of line, it went back into sort of distortion, and then you came together. And then as you came together, our performer picked up a real flute and she really played the flute solo from Shostakovich's Leningrad. So what is the learning from the familiars? Is people wanted to buy their wicker dolls. They got a relationship with a doll. Everybody afterwards is going, can I buy her? It's got my name on it and she moves. I didn't see that coming in a million years. There was a huge emotional response. The dolls made everybody frightened, which isn't a bad thing. But in Ice Road, people were weeping when the speakers played Leningrad. Like I said, too much surprise, they threw the dolls. The tech was established. It was stuff we bought from the States for 25 cents, but they were made by brilliant human beings who adapted them for what we needed. The audience didn't care how they worked. They were just happy they did. They succeeded in pulling the audience together as a congregation, stimulated interaction between strangers, and they allowed me to tell stories that were bigger, more personal, more visceral, And they kind of gave me a way into kind of whispering into the ear directly of the audience member, something I'd never experienced before. So our next show was The Undrowned, and we were, as you can see from the date, it was going to be in 2020 in a factory or office space. It was about foundlings in the 18th century and women who wet nursed them. So in the 18th century, we used to just, you know, having a child out of wedlock was frowned upon. And so women were leaving their children at church steps. And women in the Essex marshes would be paid to breastfeed, to wet nurse these foundlings. And it's about a kind of woman who was a wet nurse, and she has claimed to wet nurse 1,000 babies. So it was once again going back to kind of magical realism about women who do things. And we were going to use augmented reality for the first time. We had started planning our space. This is the designs as we go through. We have these massive design boards. And we had started looking at the work of Andrea Koch and Walker, I've forgotten his first name, who was the photographer. We started looking at their work and seeing how it might sort of build our world with us. And then it hit. There was nothing to be done. So we decided to resist the urge to produce. We're not going to run to produce. We're not going to produce anything. We decided to use the time to do more research and development and to think about what it is we could possibly make. Just before the pandemic, I'd been given a fellowship with the RSC, the Royal Shakespeare Company, and the American tech company Magic Leap, who made glasses for augmented reality. Augmented reality is where we are all sat in a room together in life, in real time. We can see each other. We put on glasses, or we pick our phone up, or our packet of tissues, not even my phone, put up our phone and we put it triggers, and as we look around the room, there is another reality layered on top. So I could trigger it, look up like that, and there's a 6-foot dragon comes out of the floor, but I'm still in the room with everybody else. It's not VR. And we made a show called Where Once We, which was based on Midsummer Night's Dream, using augmented reality, Magic Leap glasses, live performance, and a script I'd written. And those are them. I think they're the way forward. I'm very passionate about this. I won't bore you with it now, but augmented reality and live performance, there is something beautifully symbiotic about those two things. And as a writer and as an artist, I can make things happen that I could only dream about 5 years ago. So during this time, we began to ask the question, so if we're making these shows that do all these things, why is our marketing a piece of paper that you get through your door and it lies inert like a dead fish on the floor? Why isn't our marketing more interesting? So we managed to find some research money to look at animating flyers, so that you use augmented reality to animate. So you get a flyer through the door, and this is the one we mocked up, that we prototyped. And on the right is a QR code. You put your phone over the QR code, and as you do, the hazelnut splits open, and out of it comes a pond and kind of wavy reeds. And you see a little girl's face in the water, and she's laughing at you. And then out of it bubbles the sound and music, and out of it bubbles the words, The Undrowned. So the idea is that you start your AR journey with us and your story journey with us at home. I think I might just hold it there, if that's all right, everybody, and just give everybody a 5-minute break. We're halfway through the session, and it feels like now's a good time. If that's all right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. If that's all right with everybody, it is now 5 to 7. If you go off and make a coffee and all that sort of thing. Also, we're going to have a question session at the end. So if you want to spend a bit of time just thinking about anything I've not been clear on. Oh, somebody sniffed really loud in my ear then. Think of it during that time. So we'll see you in 5 minutes back at 7 o'clock. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Sharon. See you back here in 5 minutes, everyone.
Hello. Hello, everybody. Are we all rested? Can you hear me, Marjorie? Great, thanks, love. I started a talk once. I went blathering off and didn't look at the chat where somebody was frantically trying to tell me that my audio wasn't working. I was in my element as well, right in my stride. So I felt a bit of an imposter talking about tech when I couldn't even work Zoom properly. Some really lovely comments in chat. Thanks very much. Somebody's asked if I will go back to the hazelnut, which I will do very quickly, so he could just have a quick look at it. I'm hoping we are all back in the room. We should be. I would just wobble on a bit more so you can hear me that I'm back in the room. And I'm going to go back into sharing my screen again. So that, and I will go back. I don't know whoever wanted it, but that is the hazelnut for the AR flyer. It's currently being tested with I think about 50 people are trying it out at the moment as we speak. It went out earlier this week, but we decided during lockdown that it was a good time for us to kind of look at this kind of work and just go, well, when else are we going to have the time to just sit and think about these things? So I don't know if somebody wanted to take a picture of it and see if it worked on their phone. Once again, I'm the playwright. I don't know, but you can give it a go and see what happens. Okay, great. All right. So during this time, I began to think about if we are going to be in lockdown forever, because it felt like it was going to be forever, how should theatre respond? And I don't know about Canada, but in the UK, most of our major venues responded by broadcasting films of plays they had done a while ago. So they just put on their website films of plays they'd made. And I began to think, well, is that really how we should be responding to lockdown? And so I began to think about how we could build a theatre at home, how we could send theatre through the post to your home so that you could have a theatre experience at home with nobody else involved. And I began to think about tabletop one-to-one theatre. And I began to be really excited by using objects again, because I love an object. There's nothing like it in the Internet of Things. Fantastic. So how could we send you a series of objects through the post that tell a story and that you open them up, and as they open up, they trigger augmented reality? So we started a thing called the Foundling, which is kind of riffing off the Undrowned, which, as you know, we couldn't do. And we started this prototype for which we got some funding from the British government. And we built a parcel that you got through the post. The idea behind the experience is that you would sign up for the experience, then you would start to get messages on your mobile device from a little child called Jem, who would tell you that she is coming. She is coming. She's coming for you. She needs to find you. She needs to hear your story. She needs to tell your story. You'd get, after a few days, you'd get a parcel, and inside are all these little notes from a woman called Hope Good Shakespeare. And they would reveal objects, a little map, as you can see there, the corrugated map, a Bible pages, and this weird stick thing. And what you would do is you would put the weird stick thing into the Bible, into the map. It would fit in, slot in, and you would pull a little cord, and the weird stick thing would open up and start to have glow. It would have a light inside. And then you would pick up your phone, you would put your phone over the little stick thing as she is doing, and suddenly out of the map on the bottom would become the Essex Marshes, and they would grow across your tabletop. Misty, fog coming off them. You could see rain coming down. Oh God, the women who make this stuff are amazing. And it began to roll as if you were walking through it. And it was made of human hair. That sounds weird. I know, that sounds weird. It works, believe me, it looks all right. This is it. This is what you would sort of start to see, is this rolling trees, old derelict boats. And that there is actually human hair, Hope Good's own hair. And what you would do is suddenly through binaural sound is sound travels as it would. So you could hear a woman talking here, then you can hear her walk around you, and then she'll sit next to you. Through using binaural sound, Hope Good Shakespeare would come through your wall and start to walk around your room and start to tell you the story of her life and the peril she is in while this is unrolling on your desk. And it would lead you to her house. This is actually a shot of what you would see. The house is about a foot tall off the desk, and you can see the rain, you can see the hair at the bottom, and she'd start to tell you about her life while she was in the house. This is what it looks like through your mobile device. That's about a 10-minute experience, and then the idea was you have 4 chapters. So 2 days later, another parcel comes with a different object to tell you the next part of the story, and 2 days later the 3rd part would come and the 4th part would come. It would come like serialized. You would put all of the objects would sit on the map, and then when they sat on the map, if you looked at them from a certain angle, they gave you the answer to a riddle she has been posing for you all this time. So it was about, how can we explore digital technology to reach out through theatre walls and engage in time with an audience where we can't be together in a congregation. We have to be solo. We also then began to think, this is all in experiments, prototypes, all of them, about Athona. I began to think about the journeying to space as well, journeying to a venue or journeying to see your immersion. Why does it start at the door of the factory or the space we found? Why doesn't it start on your walk to the space? That's what we began to think about. So we built this little thing called Athona, which is, it was using umbrellas. I love an umbrella, they're bloody brilliant. And Athona was to curate the journey of the audience to the space. So it would start like 10 minutes before you got to the space. You'd congregate together in by a statue or a bench or this tree, or it would transform the urban landscape. So you would be given an umbrella by a weird umbrella seller. And as you opened the umbrella, smell of the marsh would come down on you. And as you opened it up, it would start to vibrate. So it had in the handle, it had haptics. So it would start to vibrate. And then over the top of it in projection mapping, you'd start to see a storm coming your way. And as the thunder rolled, the umbrella would shake. And then you would start to hear children laughing in the rain further off. Hope Good Shakespeare's children would be laughing in the rain, and they'd come running past you. And the idea was that as you were walking towards the storm, you were walking through the marshes, through Hope Good's house, and you were listening to all the children she'd raised. So it was building what we call a narrative porte cochere. Porte cochere in old days in the UK was an awning that stuck out from posh houses that the horses would go underneath, so the women coming to the ball wouldn't get wet. So the idea was that you would walk to the space, you'd be bringing this weather, these children, and as you went into the space, they would follow you in. So it's almost like you brought the weather with you, so that the story started as you sort of glide in. Once again, it's about knitting together the theatre congregation, leaning into animated objects again, an umbrella, one of the oldest tech we have. Then how can we make it into a performance pod, a performance capsule, using outside projection mapping? If we could, we did somehow want to get a kind of umbrella you could kind of hold with, and maybe augmented reality, but that's a bit clumsy. I think we'd have to. And we talked about having the projection mapping coming out of lampposts, so that as you hit a lamppost, suddenly you'd see the storm even brighter. So we turned, and also I thought, okay, if they're all in an urban landscape in a city, and they're all having this magical experience with the storm and the umbrellas and the children, other people would be watching them doing that, wouldn't they? Passers by would start to go, oh, what's that? So I thought we could actually turn the whole set of umbrellas into an animal that the outsiders can see, but the audience can't, so that we kind of make them into a digital installation. I hope I make sense on that. So it has two audiences, one that's going to the performance space who's seeing a storm, and the other that's watching the audience go to the performance. It's got really meta all of a sudden, hasn't it? Watching them go to the performance space, but actually they're seeing something else, and that's for free. That's just as a passerby. So all of that was what we were working on and everything. And then a company in Toronto contacted us and said, we've seen your work, we really like it. Would you fancy doing a co-production between Toronto and Bristol and London? And we had a mutual friend in common, who is Emma Stenning, who is Chief Executive of Soul Pepper. And she's my old boss. We worked together at the Bristol Old Vic, and a very close friend. And she was a very close friend to the theatre company Lost and Gone, who reached out to us. So Emma was the one who kind of put us together. And the idea is that we make an immersive piece with digital technology in Toronto and Bristol. Toronto is 5 hours behind us. We are 5 hours in front. So you are 5 hours in my past. I am 5 hours in your future. So what we want to explore is, how can I make the audience see each other through time? When I'm in the future and you're in my past, how can we show the same show, but at some point the audience leaves a footprint for the next one to pick up, so that we see each other. The audiences in Toronto actually see each other. The piece is about, we were talking about the ocean, obviously the Atlantic Ocean between the UK and Canada. And I found a piece about the fact that on whaling ships, there were quite a lot of women. And I found an academic in New Zealand who has done a lot of work on this. She tells some blinding stories of these women on whaling ships who used to box the compass, which means to navigate. They were born at sea, they died at sea, they had their babies at sea, they very rarely had a home. They were on a ship with 30 men in stinking conditions, and they were killing a lot of whales. So we began to think about those women, and so we built a woman called Doria Sharp, who is a whaler. And she's been on whaling ships all her life, but now at the end of her life, she's taken over an abandoned lighthouse on the coast of Newfoundland and is waiting basically for the whales to come for her, because they will come for her because they need to take their revenge on what she's done. During that time, she's telling us the extraordinary story of her mythical life and all the things she's done. So these are some, we're early stages. We're hoping to do this next September. We're hoping. I'm making any promises at the moment to any funders or anybody, because it's a long way off. We've got a lot of work to do. But these are some of the inspirations our set designer has put together. We do creative sprints where our company comes together and spend 3 days living and eating together and dreaming. And we did that through Zoom with Lost and Gone in Toronto, which was okay, but it's not the same thing at all. So it was quite difficult. So we are also trying to build a show where we don't actually use too many air miles. So we're not together in the room all the time. It's an experiment. They are an amazing company, and they are so generous that it's quite extraordinary. And this is how we're thinking about using sails to do light and shade and darkness, and how we are actually going to try and reproduce the feeling of whales battering a lighthouse down. We are looking at the familiars at the moment. We are building those. I don't want to say too much about what they're going to be, because if we do make it in Toronto, I'm hoping you'd be there, and I don't want to spoil that surprise of what the familiar is going to be. But we are also looking really firmly using the learning from the foundling for onboarding, so that you would be notified 4 or 5 days before you turn up to the show with AR, a little AR experience, and binaural sound. You will be, through your mobile device, you would be given lots of little teasers where the story starts at home with you, and then it carries on in the space, and then it finishes after at home with you, so that it lasts, the whole experience lasts about 5 days. So what have we learned, and is it any use? Story is queen of everything. It just is. Without it, what do you have? You have an experience. You have a fleeting emotional moment. And what kind of audience interaction does your story need, if any? Don't just do audience interaction for the sake of it. I see so much. It's my big warning, is it has to really sit well within the story. It has to be part of it. You have to think of all of it. Story first. Collaboration between you all must be built from the ground up. So you're never alone as a writer, nor should you be. I am a benign dictator, I like to think. I mean, the story starts with me, so everybody looks at me. But at the end of the day, it's them who tells me how to do it. It's their imagination, their talent, their wisdom that goes, babe, we can't do it that way. It's going to cost $25,000. Are you crazy? However, I bought this $25 thing from Boston and it might do the trick. Can we give it a go? You've got to trust them. Like I said, it's a shared vision from the get-go, way before rehearsals are even thought of. It's not yours. You're just sharing it around. Other people own it. Look at each narrative beat. How do you deliver it? So, you know, we break it down into narrative beats. This happens, and this happens, and this happens. This moment here, Marietta is in the woods, naively thinking the woodcutter is going to marry her, where actually he's going to attack her. How do we do that moment? Is it in AR? Is it projection mapping? Is it, do I need text? And actually, that moment we didn't need text. There was no text. We did it with lighting and breath and a little bit of projection mapping. Never forget that your narrative must also deliver surprise. It's not just about the tech being where. Also, your narrative must deliver surprise in itself. It must startle the audience, that the story itself can move the ground under their feet, not just woofers, but also the story can move the ground under their feet. Your audience is your key collaborator. They must be sewn into the script. What are they feeling? Where are they now? Who are they in this story? How comfortable are they feeling? How comfortable do we want them to feel? In Stick House, they realized that they were actually Marietta's village and that they were the Jewish ghetto of that village, that you were Marietta's people, you are a family. In Ice Road, we realized that we were the orchestra. We were the orchestra who played with Leah, and that we were also dying. So it's important that whoever you are, whoever your audience is, that they have a real sense of connectivity to the story. Test, test, and test again. This might take years because it needs to. I made this massive mistake of going, I need to make a show every 2 years. I need to make a show every 2 years. Says who? So I rushed Ice Road after Stick House. I rushed it, and it was less satisfying for me. We haven't made a show now for 4.5 years because of pandemic, I know. But really, I think 3-4 years for this kind of stuff, for you to really think about it. You get used to saying, I don't know. It's allowed. Everybody comes to me and says, what do you want? I go, I don't know. What are you suggesting? I don't know what I want. So let's have a think. It's all right. The world is everything. It must be thoroughly examined, rules defined, environments built, and the tech must sit in that world. So we built the world of Leningrad. We built the world of Marietta's forest and her stick house. You know, we will build the world of the foundling on your desktop. Everything in that world must be as authentic as possible to that world. If you want to make something slightly magical, fine. It frees you. It frees you to be able to imagine as a playwright or a writer or as an artist. It frees you to write a new contract with your audience that you never had before. I can reach out and touch them. Literally, I can be in the room, touch them. I can stand next to them and hear them laugh or not laugh where they should be laughing. I can watch them use the tech. It's a freeing thing for me. I can suddenly have I can suddenly have a little person this big running across a tabletop if I use augmented reality. And it gives me more control as a writer. I am mistress of my own universe, literally. I am mistress of my own universe. I'm not giving this work over to somebody else. I'm at the center of it as the director of it. Cross-disciplinary collaboration can be brutal. Allow it time and wear your armor. If there's a headline, that's it. For Ice Road, for Stick House, we chose not the wrong team. It was a team that weren't really on board with what we were trying to do. And it was brutal. It was totally brutal. It was horrible. We were fighting and falling out all the time because they were used to working in a theatre venue and to having a lighting rig. And we were saying, we need to build the whole thing. So it got very confrontational, and it will never happen again. Yes, it's a very scary word. It's really easy to go, no, let's not do that. No, saying somebody, yes, give it a go, it's scary. It takes more time than you have, and it takes more money than you think, but not as much as you think. The money it takes are people. All of my money goes on people, not tech. The tech I can buy for £2.50. The tech it's the people who use the tech, mold it, reimagine it, and then reharness it for the story I've got to tell. Sorry, bear with me. I think I've spoken enough. I think that's more than enough for me. Thank you. That is my email address. You can see the films of the Foundling. There are films of me talking about the Foundling and how it works. There are films of some short films of our work at raucous.org.uk. We also have been holding sessions with artists around the country and around the world talking about their practice, which we worked actually with Pas Marai on. And also we've been doing classes called the Raucous Exchanges over lockdown as well, and you can read more about that. But I think that's enough of me blathering on. So I'm going to return to you now, and thank you for your kind patience in staying with me.
Thank you so much, Sharon. If you wanted to open your cameras or put the little emoticon, just to give Sharon just a huge round of applause for all of that inspiration. Just really incredible and mind-blowing, and just the journeys that we've been taking on through your work is amazing. I know I have a million questions. So I encourage you, if you do have questions, please put them into the chat. And as well, if you have a question that you'd like to ask in person, we're certainly open to that. You can unmute and turn on your cameras and ask those in person. We have a little bit of time. So, or
maybe put your hand up first.
Yeah.
Somehow to let us know that you have a question, then we'll just, yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. I'm going to start us off. My burning question is, I have a million, like I said. I'm really curious how you shaped the audience so they knew where to stand for the orchestra.
That was such a great question. You could tell you're a theatre maker, Mrs. You really can, because we spent bloody ages over there. So I was like, okay, all these people, who knows what a Russian orchestra looks like? Nobody knows. So we stood there for ages, and then I was like, we have ushers in the room, but they're dressed as characters, and they're not allowed to interact with the audience, only if there's a problem, because I don't want anybody to go, you're meant to stand over there. That's not, you have to let the audience kind of as an animal do what they do. So we sort of gave them hints throughout the show that on their speakers, if you look really closely, there's a little mark, and we used the center part like a clock. and like a half a clock. It's really hard to explain how we did it, half a clock. And they were given, when they went in, a kind of letter, and on it was a marking on the clock and the marking on a map, and told them to keep it safe, don't lose it, this is where you've got to be. And then all of a sudden, our actress said at one point, something about Dimitri, if you've forgotten where you stand. Oh my God, I wrote you a map. What's the, you're so dada, you're so starving, you can't remember, and then, Sergey, have you got his map? And then the audience go, oh, it's a map. I've got to get my map out. They got their map out, they looked at the thing, and they just shuffled it round, and they sort of made it, but they began to realize that as they stood in the right place, the music would come in. So they began to work with each other and go, I think you're a violin, I think you stand with the violins, they're over there, and I'm percussion. I tell you something, they're bright, they picked it up really quick. And if it was slow, an usher might go, comrade, do you have the map? If we said the map one more time. But only if they were really, what audience dynamics are like. They can be fast some nights and slow the others. But it worked. We just made it part of the kind of onboarding in the bar. They were given a map by a secret man who came up and went, comrade, to take this, you'll need it later, keep it safe in your pocket, and all of that. We gave them a load of stuff to take in with them. So that's how we did it.
It's amazing.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. I would also I just wanted to add that you said something a little bit also just in relationship to what the actors have as information and the agency they have to be in that space and to operate as actors, to be away from text, to be able to move a moment forward. I think that's an important point, that as a playwright, that there's also that space because you're working in an immersive environment.
Yeah, and I mean, our actors are great, and we work with the actors we know who get it. So they might, I don't expect my audience to respond or interact with the actors. I don't think that's fair. There's a lot of people coming into immersion who are really frightened. And I think for an actor to run up to them and go, it's not for me. And I know it's for Punch Drunk, and that's great. I get it. It's great for that. But I'm making this for a theatre audience who might be just a little bit more reticent. So they will look at somebody and go, I think you'll be all right for me to talk to you. So the actors will go up to, they would judge the moment. If somebody looks on the floor, if they approach them, they won't speak to them. And they just do small things like, Marta, how is your mother? Is she well? They're just sort of trying to include them in it without freaking them out, without making them feel on the spot or embarrassed.
Sharon, I'm super interested. I love that you say test, test, and test again. And I've been thinking a lot about how theater is made and where the audience comes in and how we solicit feedback from the audience. Often the audience comes, a couple of questions here and there. Sometimes what artists really want to know is like, do you love my work? Which seems so unproductive sometimes when you're just trying to develop something, right? And so I'm curious if you have a way in which you solicit information from the test audiences that are coming in, and at what point do you bring the audience, and how do you get information from them in a way that feels productive to you and not like, do you like my show? Yeah.
We always, when we do a creative sprint, which I think I mentioned, where we have 3 or 4 days, it's often a week actually together, night and day, we rent a house and we stay together. Is at the end of every one of those, there is an audience tester. We bring in audience, but we bring in 4 different audiences. So we bring in an audience who's seen our show before, one of our shows before, an audience who has never seen our show before, and we work with colleagues in the cultural sector here. We bring in a school of mainly 16-year-olds who are, attention span of a gnat mostly. We bring in colleagues, other people in the field who are making this kind of work. And how we do it is we try to build something that looks a bit like what we might want to do. We kind of try and build a real big atmosphere, and we try and do a part of the show for them with the thing. The best way of all is we hire a moderator. I leave the room. We hire a moderator. We sit them down with drink and food. And the moderator, who is normally an evaluator of great experience, we pay for them to come in and talk. It's the best. And we film it. We say, do you mind if we film it? And he'll say, how did you feel in that moment when that thing, could you undo the screw, the jar? Could you do that? Could you do that? Did you think to look in the jar? You didn't. Why didn't you look in the jar? It's like, oh, I felt embarrassed. Yeah, it's not good, is it? No, it's not. So I think investing money in a really great personable evaluator who could, and they work with me beforehand on the questions I want to know is, does it make you scared? Why didn't you do that thing? And all the time I'm watching, and he's got an earpiece in, and I can talk to him and say, ask them about that moment. So he and I kind of collaborate on it, and then we have the recording. We have all of our recordings, and sometimes we write it up. It's also very good for funding. So, you know, whoever's paid for it is then you can send them the recording and go, this is how we did the process. This is what they thought of it.
It's incredible.
It's not too difficult. And if you give people who really want to talk about it, but don't give them sorry, I'm about to swear.
You can swear, it's okay.
I was about to say,
we swear in Canada.
Don't give them a fucking form. Just don't. Don't give them this form that they have to fill in at the end like they're a beagle. You know what I mean? Like in some kind of, but don't do that. It's so awful. Make it creative for them. Make it as creative as the process itself. You know, build it, get your actors in to do a little bit with them, and then so they feel like they're looking behind a curtain and you care about them and their opinion. So we sit them down on a comfy sofa, we give them squash or we give them wine, one of the two, and we give them some biscuits, a cake, and we just go, okay, can we talk? Can you give us 15 minutes just to talk? And they just, half an hour later, they're still talking.
It's so useful, and it sounds like it's such an ingrained part of the process. Yeah, and I think, yeah, I've been thinking a lot about that and ways in which we make theater and how much we center the audience as a part of that, rather than just saying, hey, did you like the show? You know, it's such a superficial question, you know, like
it is. Yeah. And I think, you get them in early. Obviously not all of your audience is going to be early, and we've also played with evaluation during the show. You know, once again, don't give them a form, for God's sake. You know, we're subsidized. We have to tell our funders how the audience felt. So we did a thing. I was stupid really, but part of Leningrad is when you come out into the bar, which we'd made into a Leningrad bar. So the bar itself that before you went in was all made into a kind of Moscow bar or whatever, is that there was a phone on the way out, and once in a while it would ring and it would ring and it would ring, and then somebody would pick it up and they'd go, hi comrade, it is me, Sergey. So how do you think about the show? You know, something like that. It was like, did you like it? So it was like covert feedback. Yeah. And because they were on their own in a telephone box, somebody would go, I didn't like it. It was really cold. So just to get a kind of emotional temperature, we had this kind of recorded thing.
Right.
That actually audience are queued up to lose.
There's so many questions.
There's so many questions. Yeah, I want to make some time for them.
Yeah. Okay.
Our first question is from a friend and a collaborator who clearly is also an artist but a production manager. It's Rebecca Vanderbilt's question. Rebecca, I don't know, I'm happy to read the question, but you're also welcome to unmute and ask the question in person if you like as well.
Please go ahead.
The question is, I'd love to ask about scope, to give us a sense of how big and what kind of team to build, how many years of planning. I expect the fundraising team alone is huge, full-time, years of work. That's a production manager's question, no doubt.
Thank you. So you're looking at the fundraising manager and she's not full-time. No, we are actually freelancers, and we have to work project to project. We're not funded as a kind of what we call MPO, which is like 3 years at a time. We dream something up, then we have to go for funding for the first R&D, second R&D, production. So all of these projects have been funded through, we don't have philanthropy in the UK much at all. So through our Arts Council and through some nice mad men who just like us and want to give us a little bit here. You know, I'll have one of my guys will say, do you want $5 for something? I'll go, yeah, can I have $5 to make some thing work? And he'll go, okay, go on, have it. So the scope is when we are in production week, there are 37 of us. We are freelancers. There are 14 of us, and I only pay them when they work. I haven't got that kind of money, but I pay them when they work. 14 to 19 of us, and then the company's run by 3 women. It's all women, by the way, as well. We're all female, apart from one man called Jack, and I can't get rid of him, and he kind of just gets us, so I let him stay. And he's also a complete technological genius, and I can't let him go. I'm like, but our AI are made by female. So I would say 3 to 4 years is a good time. We do a bite size R&D 1, you know, R&D 2, and we try and do everything cheap. We also try to be sustainable. So all our stuff is found in the space or hired or rented, so that we don't make stuff and throw it away. So the scope isn't as big as you think it is.
That's great. I think that's such a good question, because I think that's also the expectation, or what's the word? The assumption that we make, that it's like, oh, it must be such a huge team, so many people involved, blah, blah. Yeah, it is lots of people involved, of course, like you're saying, but that in fact it's about being creative and thinking and focusing on what you want to do, and then anything's possible if you really put your mind to it.
And if they love you, they will take a risk with you. If they love you and what you're doing, they will take a risk with you. And sometimes, to be honest, just between us, we've had no money, we've run out, and a couple of my collaborators went, oh shit, I'll do it in the evenings, don't worry about it.
Right.
They will starve with you. It's amazing.
So next question is from Jesse. Jesse, did you want to ask the question yourself?
Sure.
Go for it.
Hi, thank you so much for this. Sharon, this is really great. My question was whether or not you are looking at digital only productions or experiences. And this is because this is what I am trying to work on right now, is an immersive, accessible, how do you create the community to have a Sleep No More style digital experience, and then live stream that for that second audience. So it's a crazy big project that we know nothing about, and we're figuring it out right now. But are you looking into that digital only world, or are you keeping the element of real person to person interactions?
Yeah, I think we are purely digital isn't probably my bag. I mean, probably the Foundling is the most purely digital, but it still involves a live audience member at the end. But no, primarily I'm a playwright and I love the live. It's just the live for me is the most important thing. And it's just then how can I make the live, enhance the live using digital? I've been on panels with Marshmallow Laser Feast before now. We've just done the RSC's Midsummer Night's Dream thing that I was involved with early on, and they've just made a purely digital online for an online platform, which is really interesting. So no, we haven't really considered that, but blimey, good luck for you. And there are people who are doing that, and
there's some amazing examples coming.
There are beautiful, but it's probably not what we do at the moment.
Yeah.
So never say never, babe. I'm always just curious about what's around the corner.
I said never to this until we came up with this idea this year, and now we're trying to figure it out and trying to find the things that you're talking about between the audience, between the performers, when everybody is still at home. To me, I don't know if it's theater, like I would explain theater, but it's a really fantastic challenge. And if we can find better ways to communicate online and to have better, what's the word I'm looking for? Like the way that you, that Passmarie has introduced this event and taken the time to remind us that we're all in our different spaces together is a big shift in how we've done online events. So I think there is new ways of engaging that are happening. I can't wait to have people in studios again. But in the meantime, like I think I think it's an interesting experiment. Yeah.
Thanks, Jessie. That's
Thank you.
really
Jessie.
inspiring.
Yeah, thanks. And then Jesse, if you did want to put any other resources of things that you're looking at into the chat, that's great to share with everyone here. Stella has a great question that kind of ties into this conversation. I don't know, Stella, if you wanted to come online, or I'm happy to read the question as well.
Sure. So I work a little bit in trying to make projects that sort of intersect gaming or play into theater. And I'm interested if you have some insight on that, maybe creating work where the audience has some sort of participatory or like way that they inflect or interact into the story itself.
That's a really great question. Thank you for saying that, because I didn't make that clear in this. It's not what we do. I talk about this quite a lot, the gamification of theatre, which is great and right, and the gaming world and the theatre world are now kissing cousins, and what the gaming industry is doing with narrative is beyond extraordinary. I mean, branching narrative and all of that stuff. My God, Jesus Christ, they're taking the glasses off and wiping their forehead. I mean, they are working hard at it. For me, it was always about introducing a purely theatre audience to what's possible. And often interaction for them is really, really scary. But there are a lot of companies, obviously, that do a great deal of interaction. And I've noticed there that there's a lot more, that's rubbish. Sorry, strike that. There's an audience more used to interaction and gaming that go there. But for me, it was just, how does stagecraft evolve using all the new tools? But myself, I don't like interaction in a live space. It frightens me, and I feel a bit foolish. I did a punch drunk early experiment called the Lost Will and Testament, where I had to be in a room on my own, and there were bags of sand, and I had to weigh them up. And if I got them right, the door opened, and I completely spun out because I knew somebody was watching me from the gantry, and I felt really stupid, and I'd got it wrong. And I vowed I would never do that. And I'm not saying all gamification of theatre does that, or gaming and theatre does that at all. There are some amazing people out there doing interaction work, but we're immersive, not necessarily interactive.
Such a great clarification. Yeah, thank you.
I think there's a question from Jackson Nair. Jackson? Maybe?
Thanks, Stella.
Okay, maybe Jackson's unable to unmute, but the question is, he's talking about someone who's spent years eagerly anticipating the intersection between theater and augmented reality. So he'd love to know your thoughts that you had mentioned about having augmented reality in theater during the presentation. Maybe some further thoughts around that?
Yeah, I love augmented reality. I write for VR. I do write for VR, and I've directed VR in the past, and VR is its own baby. I think it's its own cultural. I don't think VR and virtual reality, with the box on your face, and live performance right now, for me, they don't quite sit right. I think that would change as a tech change. So I'm just putting that away, because that doesn't really interest me right now. But augmented reality really does, because I can build a world for them anywhere. They can be, like I said, at home, they could be at the office, and I can build them a theatre world wherever they are. But also as a writer, I can start to think about, I don't have to build huge sets and flying monkeys that cost thousands and hundreds of thousands of pounds. Now I can have a coder and a vision, and I can make that happen with a person sat in the room, so that the magic seems to come out the floor. And that is extraordinary. There's a lot going wrong with that at the moment. The tech's not quite ready. And the work I did with the RSC and Magic Leap was painful, because I didn't really know what I was doing. That's the whole reason for it. It's quite scary doing this stuff sometimes. And I did lose my confidence hugely, because the augmented reality and a live performer in the space as well, they get in the way of each other, and then the shadows, and then the thing gets thrown out. And I'm at the RSC, which is a lifelong ambition to work with them. And it just went horribly, horribly wrong, and that we just couldn't get it to work. But I am excited because I could see the possibility of it. And if we start small and contained, like a little something running across a desk, baby, you know what? And that has an impact on your audience, that's great. And that's enough for now. So also be really, really, with your ambition, it could be here, take it to here, please, with tech right now, you know, because this is never, you can dream it up, baby, don't mean it happens, it's going to work. So, you know, small wins are really, really important, I think, and they should be treasured. So yeah, augmented reality, I think, is a way forward for us all. There's not many people really grabbing the opportunity just yet, but I think they will.
Yeah, just to say, we haven't started working with augmented reality quite yet in a creative field, though we will start having some workshops with another artist soon. But we have started working at TPM with augmented reality and ASL interpretation, and having deaf interpretation available on an AR platform so that the show can happen in front, and then the AR would support with the deaf interpretation, with ASL interpretation in Canada. And so that deaf individuals could come to a show anytime and have the interpretation, that we wouldn't have to schedule certain days for days that would be interpreted or things like that. So we're starting small, and we believe we found a way. We've done it, some experiments on it. They're actually the accessibility lab on that experiment is a 5-minute little short doc that we have available on our YouTube, some of our experimentations, but we feel really confident in a year or so that we'll be offering that someone who's deaf can come to one of our shows and they can get the interpretation through AR and not have to look screen to screen, but actually kind of experience the whole thing in the whole space together. I think it kind of leads to a little small question that Celine has. I think she's actually had to leave the group, but you kind of touched on it, that she had written in the chat, the shows you're working on sound amazing, but also very large in scope. Where would you suggest starting for a small production and team? And I think you nailed something, that to kind of lower your expectations and do kind of proof of concept, smaller ideas, so that you're not expanding, you know, you're understanding that tech and understanding the dramaturgy of that before you kind of scale up. And I think that's a really wise approach.
Yeah, I mean, Raucous started with me and Tom Burton, a guy called Tom Burton, just the two of us, and we just started making little experiments and having chats and all that sort of thing. So yes, the thing is, the great thing about this work is you can make it as big or small as you like, and also, you know, audiences are so grateful for it. You can make a little 5-minute thing that people can come along and drop in on. It doesn't have to be this big thing. It's just that I try to make small, and I always end up making big because I don't know what's wrong with me. But yes, small is beautiful.
There's a question from Savannah. Savannah, maybe I'm saying the name wrong. Are you still
Savannah.
here? Savannah, yes.
Hi, yeah.
Hi, do you want to ask the question? It's a great question.
Yeah. Okay, so one of the things I've been struggling with is, like, especially when you're looking at scripting these interaction points and giving audience agency, where they maybe have like an A, B, or C track. And then maybe there's also like a main track that you eventually loop them back to. So my question when you're designing these sorts of experiences where the audience has a lot of agency and is arguably even like perhaps like a character in the story, how do you actually script that structure wise? Because some of the stuff I've tried playing with is like sort of mind maps, more visual things, or like really complex color coding systems.
I don't branch. So we made a decision where first off, we did some experimentations around branching narrative and audiences. So matters of agency is actually my academic research. It's because I'm an academic as well. So agency and audience agency is what I'm trying to do my PhD in. And we made a decision quite early on, as we did do a small one where we had branching narrative, and or like you could choose A, B, or C room and you go off, but you all come back together again. And it was fine, and we managed something, but the story just felt really sticky. Like it just, I don't know, there was something about them as a congregation, as a group, experiencing everything together. So we tend to move them as an animal, and they have agency as an animal. That's how we think of it. So they kind of have a hive brain. It's really hard to explain, that we appeal to, that where they move or they react or they do things together. And the reason is, once again, is because I'm making it for a sort of to show theatre audiences what can be done without them being too frightened that they're going to be split from their, because Punch Drunk is brilliant and they're great at that. Pete at Punch Drunk and that lot, amazing at that, letting people go off them. But a load of people I know didn't want to be on their own and feel exposed. I was at a Punch Drunk show and I didn't see anybody for 3 hours, nobody, just my own wandering around an old post office building. And I just felt really cross. So I wanted to stay with people. I wanted to experience them together. So that's why we talk about congregation, is we keep them together. But there is a woman called Kristen McGarry, who's a British gaming expert, but she writes a lot about branch and narrative and agency around 3 spaces. You should look at her work, Kristen McGarry. She talks really well about it. And she's a theatre writer. She was a theatre writer. And she talks about her scripts. The scripts don't look normal, obviously, because you've got your audience moving around. So they are color-coded. My scripts are color-coded. This is what the text should be doing. This is where the audience are. This is what they're feeling. This is what they're doing. And this is what the actors are doing. And this is what the actors are saying. So there's like, I think about 7 different colors. So I'm sorry, Savannah, that wasn't very useful for you, but.
Can I ask like a follow-up question though, that's like that a little bit more specific? So then when you're scripting your experiences, they do look a little bit more like a traditional theater script then, or do you have little notes about?
We have little notes. They are kind of half drawn, half. I tend to get my set designer to draw half of them as well. Whatever goes. Some of it is filmed, some of it is just me talking to people. We're sort of like a bit like a magazine magpie thing, it is. And a lot of the text, the dialogue is there, but also I would just say to my actors, I just need you to hit this moment here, however best you see it. And then this bit is absolutely scripted because I have no time to piss about. I need to get on it. So basically, the whole thing is whatever tool is right for the moment. So yeah, no, it doesn't look like a traditional script, not my other scripts. It's all over the place a bit, but we kind of, and I write a lot of prose in those scripts, a lot of prose. I'm trying to build an atmosphere so we all feel it.
Thanks.
Brilliant. That's a great question, Savannah. Thank you. And just so brilliant to hear your articulation of how those scripts are also, let's just call them scripts, but they're roadmaps, and that they're also multimedia. Of course they are, because the approach is not a one-dimensional approach. So that's very inspiring from someone who does sketches and things about their shows as a writer. We do have a question from the TPM Patron Services Manager. I don't know, Karen, if you want to come online to ask your question.
Sure. Hi, Sharon. Thank you. That was so absolutely wonderful. Side note, my goal once borders open up is to visit my aunt in Bristol, and I'm already going to be like, so let's go see a show together. So get prepared to see me.
Okay.
But I had a show just about accessibility and about reaching out to audiences. As my role of patron services manager, my brain kind of leads that way. And so just with shows that involve so much technology, I was wondering if you had ideas, or what is the way that you invite and bring in patrons who might not have access to personal technology like a phone or Wi-Fi or a computer, and also thinking about those patrons who might not be able to navigate that digital world because they're not comfortable with it or need support with those worlds.
It's a good question. It's one I'm asked a lot of. So there's lots of different stuff that we do around access. Although we make our work in unloved and unfound spaces, the first thing we do is make sure that it's physically accessible for all. So we that's the first thing we put in, is make sure, and then we walk it. There's that. with the technology and stuff, I don't ask them to do much in this space for that very reason. It happens to them. We do it to them. They don't do anything. They do. So they don't realize they're triggering by walking this way and moving this way. They don't realize they're triggering. Or we could ask them, I don't know, in one of the shows, one of the characters goes, you know, and then I raised my hands or something. They go, raise your hands. And as you raise your hands, what you don't realize is you're triggering then the bombardment coming over. And I do that for a reason. It's for that very reason, for accessibility. So people don't have to bring their tech to us. They don't have to interact with it. They don't have to worry about the tech. It's literally there to be, or instill awe and wonder. I don't know how you did that. And then also when they were in the formation of the orchestra, if one steps out, it doesn't work. And they realized they had to stand still, and they started holding hands. They didn't realize they were triggering that at all. And they didn't care about it. So I've been clear about Raucous is we don't ask them because it's scary. I'm trying to make the story shine through using the best tools I can, and not putting you in a position where you're frightened of breaking it, or you're frightened that you'll be made to look a fool. So there's that. We also do quiet productions, performances for neurodiverse people. So ones without loud music and loud bangs and all that sort of thing, which has proved really, really popular, and is something we really believe in. So yeah, that's it. Our at home stuff, like the Foundling and our other experiments, yes, you need a phone, but we do everything. That interaction is always through a mobile phone, because most people do have one, not everybody does. I know the digital poverty is a big issue, but a lot of people do, and they know how to use it as their lifeline, and they're not scared of it. So actually the mobile device is your best friend, because people are competent with it. QR codes, who'd have thought QR codes would become as popular as they have since lockdown? And now my father at 83 is using QR codes to locate theatre experiences. Go figure. So, all that stuff is changing. People, how they use tech is changing.
I think there's one last question. There's 3 more minutes left before we get to the time, and want to respect everybody's time as well. But Paul, if you're still here, if you want to ask, it's an interesting question about Paul. Yes.
Hey, thanks, Ingrid. Thank you, Sharon. Hey everyone. Hope everyone's doing well. Sharon, I was wondering a bit about the process for your artistic development now that you're involved with writing for VR, which I think is a beautiful sentence. You mentioned that through your playwriting, you're now able to make and see worlds beyond what a typical theater space gave you. But I was wondering if, though this new world is full of possibility, does it ever feel limiting, or do you ever miss something from that traditional black box that VR or AR couldn't give you? And thanks for this. This was dope.
It's okay. You're very welcome. Okay, this may be flip, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to be flip about it, but I miss the fact that audiences sometimes can just sit down and be quiet. And sometimes they just ruin everything. Sometimes they just,
that's fair.
Do you know what I mean? Sometimes they just, they try and take things apart. The dolls had dresses on, they were all different, and trousers. People were undressing them to see how they work.
Marjorie, that would be Marjorie.
That would be Marjorie, curious Marjorie. So sometimes, so I wish the audience weren't in the room, because they just don't do what they're told. But no, that's just being flip. But sometimes I have, gone, oh, stop doing that. That's so annoying. But no, I don't think there is. I mean, I still write what we call my straight plays. I've just finished one actually this weekend. So I'm still commissioned by theatres to write straight drama. And I miss writing for straight drama. I miss that, me purely on my own without a huge collaborative force behind me. I do like to be able to sit down and build that world myself and deliver stuff myself that I can then pass on to somebody else. The thing is with the work I do, Paul, is that it can become overwhelming because everybody's looking at you for the answer and for the money and everything else. It's not easy. But I have to do this on my own because nobody else will pay me to do it. So the rest I have is writing straight plays where somebody else will produce it, and I'm just the writer, and that's nice, rather than being, Sharon, where do you want this thing to go? What does this mean? I don't understand what you mean here. You know, the snow's got dirty. Yeah, exactly. So it's that more than anything, actually, Paul. The process of writing for straight drama in an auditorium through to that is that one is often a rest from the other. However, the writing for immersion it is mind-blowing, and it's story expanding. Basically, I can think of worlds and build worlds that I couldn't for a small black box studio in London.
What a beautiful way to end, I think.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you so much for your question, Paul, and for everyone else who shared questions today. We are at time, and yeah, I would just like to thank you all for coming to our first Digital Creators Lab workshop series. We do have 2 more coming up on the 16th and the 21st. So if you haven't signed up already, it's in the chat box. Please do sign up. And we would love to have you join us again to expand more on the digital kind of world of storytelling. And so I'd like to take this time to just thank Sharon for kicking us off in these the workshop series, as Paul had mentioned. And yeah, I'm really grateful for you all being able to take some of your time on a Friday to join us. If you haven't signed up, please do sign up, spread the word, bring your friends along. But yeah, we're so excited to be starting the Digital Creators Lab and for it to start off with you all here with us. So I hope you have a great rest of your Friday and weekend now. But
bye. Thank you for your time. Been a real honor meeting you all. Thank you so much. And hope to see you all in Toronto at some point. Bye.
Thank you, Sharon.
Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us.
we have, oh, bye people. I think we have 2 other people that are. Bye, Savannah. Thank you. I think. Hi, Erin. Hi, Tia. I don't know if you mean to. I think they might have. Yeah. All good. All good. Great turnout, folks. I think at our peak, we were at 44, and then we pretty much sustained 40 throughout this whole time, which is lovely.
Thanks, Rinchen. Thanks, Carolyn. Thanks, Robin. That went pretty smooth.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah. Did you like it, Regine? She's amazing, isn't she?
It was amazing. You know.
Yeah.
She's such an articulate speaker. She's so eloquent.
Exactly.
You're not bored.
No.
It's just like, oh, you're working on these shows, you write straight plays, you're busy doing that, you're
PhD.
doing your PhD, you're teaching. I just kind of like, oh my God.
I also loved the Britishisms, which would be like, I'm just gonna wobble on a little bit. I'm like,
yeah.
And the babbies.
Yeah, the babbies. Don't mean to be quite flip.
But Robin and Rinchen and Indrid, that feels like a good flow, and that it'll be a little bit different with Sammy, our next workshop person, because their talk will be a recorded talk, that first one. So we'll just run that video, in fact, and so we'll sort that part out. But otherwise, the kind of chat through that seems good. It'll be a slight